Ole Miss has the ultimate free shot against the Georgia Bulldogs, and history, it's on their side. We'll explain.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network in the world. That's all because of you. Thank you very much. On today's show, we're going to dive into the college football playoff quarterfinals and the build-up to the Sugar Bowl matchup between the Ole Miss Rebels and the Georgia Bulldogs. I know we're going to be talking about this game quite a bit during all of this, but we will talk about it starting now. The lead up to this game, it's kind of been fascinating, especially with Pete Golding's press conferences setting the tone. Calm, confident, laser-focused, all of that stuff. We'll discuss what Golding had to say at the Sugar Bowl media availability, including his emphasis on the Ole Miss team that didn't play particularly well in Athens back in October. But history, believe it or not, is on Ole Miss's side. And we start with why this game represents the ultimate free shot for Ole Miss. No one has given Ole Miss a real chance to win, even as the line has shrunk to under a touchdown. And that reality could make this team extremely dangerous. All of this and more on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's an important thing to know about the promo code, because the Sugar Bowl is the most expensive ticket in the quarterfinals to this point, and I do not see that changing. Pretty much everybody I've talked to is going down for that game. So if you're doing so, probably need to start as soon as possible if we're going to be completely honest about that. So this game, in my opinion, and others' opinions, represent the total free shot that Ole Miss has against the national championship favorite that is the Georgia Bulldogs. Indiana 13-0 beat Ohio State in the championship game. Georgia's just kind of hanging back in the weeds, but Georgia has the talent profile that is absolutely capable of winning the national title. This will be the best roster that you will face. The second best roster you face is if you beat the Georgia Bulldogs and you get Ohio State. But this is the best roster in the entire country. I'm a huge fan of Gunnar Stockton. I'm a huge fan of Zach Branch. And all of those wide receivers and the running backs. And Georgia defensively is always Georgia defensively. A really good team that is in prime position to make a run. They're coming into this Sugar Bowl expecting to make a run starting with Ole Miss. Now, there's a lot of stuff on Ole Miss's side in this game. A lot of stuff. It's probably more than you're going to hear about in other places. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show. But Ole Miss has a free shot of no pressure. They can just go completely free and try and make plays and do what you have to do and win the game. And the Sugar Bowl, as we know, has a special place for Ole Miss fans, largely because of the gap from 1970 to 2015. That gap of going was there. But Ole Miss has been 3 times in the last decade, and it's still equally as special. This will be Ole Miss's 11th trip to the Sugar Bowl. So when you talk about the meaning of this particular game, it kind of elevates it even more. This is the biggest game in program history. Not even close. Not even the same area code. Bigger than the game that happened last week. Every game that Ole Miss plays, honestly, played starting with about the Florida game in the regular season, was the biggest game in program history. I'll stand by that. I will fight on that hill. But this is the biggest game in program history, and you get a free shot. You have made it to the quarterfinals, and you get a free shot against a team that is favored over you by less than a touchdown. that hasn't played a competitive football game in a month. We've talked to Bill Flowers. He comes on the show all the time and talks about how much players hate bye weeks. And the big problem in the 2003 Ole Miss LSU game was the fact that Ole Miss had a bye week before LSU, and it took a little while to get them going. The offense didn't quite go in sync. Georgia last year got Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. This is another trip back to New Orleans for the Georgia Bulldogs. Notre Dame won that game. Now, that was Gunnar Stockton's first start, and there were some extenuating circumstances that was going on, but they still lost the football game, and they still are going back to the same place that they went to last time. Ole Miss will have the meaningful edge in this game as far as the game actually meaning something. Georgia, if they don't win the national championship, the season's a failure. This is their juggernaut. They're Georgia. They're a really good team. They're supposed to do all right in these games. That's what they are built for. That's what they spend for, all of that stuff. Ole Miss, after coming off of a celebration against Tulane, where they absolutely took them apart, by the way. People are going to talk about Tulane. Ole Miss had the backups in the whole fourth quarter. If Ole Miss wanted to, they could have scored 70 points in that game. More so than the previous time. Pete Golding took his foot off the gas. And John Summerall should be very thankful that he did, because Ole Miss could have named their score in that game. And now you have the Georgia Bulldogs, the ultimate free shot, a chance to avenge the previous game. The one game in the season that Ole Miss football lost was to the Georgia Bulldogs. You get a rematch in the Sugar Bowl, just like the 1959 Ole Miss Rebels got after the Billy Cannon punt return in Tiger Stadium. A game was played down in the Superdome, or in Tulane Stadium, I should say, in the Sugar Bowl, and Ole Miss won that game 21-0. One of the 11 trips to the Sugar Bowl by the Ole Miss Rebels. This is a free shot. It's house money. Even if Ole Miss loses the game and it doesn't matter the score, if Georgia won the game 50-0, it wouldn't matter. Momentum for next season is off the charts already. You're playing with house money to the point after that Tulane game that this game just doesn't matter for anything negative. Positive, they can take it to another level, but the worst that can happen is it stays where it is right now. That means you're going to do fantastic in the transfer portal. That means you're going to recruit pretty well. I know the people associated with the Ole Miss football program, they're going to do very nice things in high school recruiting and the portal. There's weird cryptic text messages about Portal Pete from the Jordans. So obviously, are they going to do the 2024 thing that they did before? And them staying in the fold, the Mannings coming back. Listen, everybody talks about how Ole Miss was pulling the rope in the same direction, and that's how they got to this point. I'm not saying that one coach is better than the other, but I will say this. One coach is more of a divisive figure than the other, which means that even more people could be pulling the rope in the same direction. And that's kind of what's happening right now. You know, they're going to identify in the transfer portal. You know, they're going to do what they have to do, but this staff is going to springboard from this Georgia game into the transfer portal window, essentially the next day or sooner, and start bringing in commitments and all that, getting ready for the 2026 class. Now, we're still waiting to hear on Trinidad Chambliss and what's going on there waiver wise, and if he is going to stay at Ole Miss or get into the portal, which after that AT&T commercial, that'd be a pretty terrible thing to do. But we're still waiting on that. I think Kewan Lacey's probably gone. I mean, he's acting like he is. I mean, that's fine. We'll see when the people are there. Both of those players were not at Ole Miss 12 months ago. 12 months ago, they weren't at Ole Miss. And that lets you know what the transfer portal can be. people that can be replaced and stuff like that. You get a running back from Missouri that ran for 100 yards, and you get a quarterback from D2 Ferris State, and it turns out those are the two players that led you on a playoff run. Go find the next ones if they leave, if they stay, build and do it again. It's a pretty simple thing for everybody to deal with. This is an unbelievable free shot that will provide momentum going into the season one way or another. I am excited about what can happen. And there are some things that can be done to give yourself a better chance than what happened in Athens, Georgia, in October. In the first matchup, Pete Golding, pointed to poor tackling as something that cost the Ole Miss Rebels in Athens. But, this game's not in Athens, and that matters. We'll talk about why that matters coming up next. There's nothing like college football season. The tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of it all, the energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever, but actually getting tickets, that part can be frustrating with long queues, logins, and prices jumping at checkout. That is why Game Time gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences with just a few taps. The app is incredibly easy to use. I went from browsing to buying tickets in just minutes. Seeing college football tickets starting as low as $25 made it easy to plan a game day trip. Sugar Bowl tickets right now are going for about $250 a piece, and they're going up. So you might want to check that out at gametime.co to see what's going on, or download the app on your phone. Knowing that prices include all the fees up front makes the whole process, kind of stress-free. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that is code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever podcast you're listening to, and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but it helps keeps all of this free. And thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Ole Miss with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more for just $5 a month or $50 per year. Go to lockedonolemess.supercast.com or check out the link down in the description or show notes to learn more. That is lockedonolemess.supercast.com, or the link is down in the show notes. All right. One thing that is kind of interesting is Ole Miss did not play well in Athens, Georgia, but this game is not in Athens, Georgia. This game is in the Sugar Bowl, in the Superdome. They're going to play the game. They're going to line it up. The score is going to be 0-0, and they're going to put 15 minutes on the clock, and we are going to start going. Ole Miss is likely going to get the ball first because Kirby is likely going to defer if he wins the toss, and Ole Miss is going to take the ball if they can. So Ole Miss is going to have an opportunity to either start rolling, go 3 and out. We will have an idea what the offense looks like going into the Georgia game right there, potentially. So this Ole Miss team going into that Sugar Bowl, you kind of think back to other games that have happened in this similar situation, to where Ole Miss faced the LSU Tigers in 1960, New Year's Day, 1960, off the 59 season. They got beat up by the infamous Billy Cannon punt return and lost the game 7-3. They rebounded in the Sugar Bowl and won the game 21-0. They played the 5th quarter game, Florida and Florida State. Everybody remember that, where Florida State, I think, came roaring back and tied the game up, and then Florida beat them in overtime. There was a game, it wasn't a Sugar Bowl, but it was hosted by the Sugar Bowl. It was a BCS National Championship game that kind of led to the 4-team playoff and then eventually into what we have now. LSU won the game of the century like in 2011 in Alabama. It was like 9-6. There was no touchdown scored, but everybody was like, wow, this is amazing. LSU won that game. They played in the, quote, Sugar Bowl or BCS National Championship game or whatever they called it there. It was in New Orleans. They didn't even cross the 50-yard line. They lost 21-0. You get what I'm saying. No team that has won in the regular season has won a rematch in a Sugar Bowl or Sugar Bowl hosted game. Ole Miss has the historic advantage going into this game. And when you look at the fact that they should have won the first game, even though they played as horribly as they did on the defensive side of the ball, that should give you confidence as well. And it helps. Listen, that Georgia game told Pete Golding that they had to do things a little bit differently. That's when they were doing all the drop 8 stuff. Remember the LSU game? Oh, they were able to rush Garrett Nussmeier with only three people. And they were doing that. They did that against Wazoo, and it was problematic. They did it against Tulane the first time. It was less problematic. But they went into Georgia, and Georgia just ran the ball downhill, similar to what Arkansas did. And they both had the same result. And they were going against that drop 8 front, the 3 defensive linemen. The quarterback had all day to throw the ball. If you could, and they just ran the ball down your throat. Both Arkansas and Georgia were able to do that. Ole Miss had double-digit missed tackles in the Georgia game. And that was also the game at the very end where Andrew Jones actually discovered a role at linebacker as they were looking for people to put on the field, which Andrew Jones probably is athletic enough. He should have had a role regardless. So this football game is going to be different because of that. Ole Miss had 4 or 5 sacks before the Georgia game, and I think they had 21 after the Georgia game. And Georgia was game 6 or 7, something like that. It was like the middle of the season. This Ole Miss defense has gotten remarkably better as this season has gone on. Now, they still give up plays. They still have a problem giving up explosive plays from time to time. But overall, this defense has improved by leaps and bounds. And Pete Golding knows that, hey, we need to lock it in on the defensive side of the ball. We need to take away the run game, because I'm going to talk about it in keys, and everybody, they're getting on the train when it comes to this. If you want to beat Georgia, you have to control the run game. Have to. If it's a 3rd and medium, you're done. They have too many athletes all over the field to deal with that. You have to force 3rd and longs and get off the field whenever that happens. That is the game plan. That is what needs to happen. And Pete Golding, in his press conference today, said exactly that. My whole thing, and my saying that I say over and over again, and I'm going to say it again, you can't let them go 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2, 1st and 10, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2, 1st and 10, because they will chew you up. That's how a Kirby Smart drive happens. That is how the offense gets unlocked, and that's how Ole Miss's defense gets unlocked as well. That's how Arkansas did them in. That is how Georgia did them in the first time, by allowing the run game to get going. Now, the benefit that happened after that Georgia game is Ole Miss quit doing as much drop 8. And they're still doing some, and it's always going to be a part of it, but it isn't like the base to where it's popping up on the sheet a lot of the time. And because of that, they're attacking in the backfield. They're forcing negative plays. They're not protecting the secondary as much. So they need to probably be aggressive on the front. And hopefully the secondary doesn't have many busts, because against the Georgia game, they had a few busts. Remember, I said early on in the season, this Ole Miss team will go as far as the front 7 will take them. And if you've listened to this show, you've heard me say that this Ole Miss team will go as far as this front 7 will take them. And whether or not Ole Miss wins this game is going to be 100% on the shoulders of the Ole Miss front 7. You have to win the line of scrimmage, or at least force a stalemate and get off the field on 3rd down. Pete Golding made a joke. It's like, hey, what's different seeing a team the second time? And he made the joke, well, maybe we'll make them punt this time, just once. they're locked in. You can tell that whenever they're giving answers, and there's weird times where they just get serious after being asked a question. Everybody's kind of feeling out what the press conference is like, and we're going to talk about the press conference set up around Ole Miss in the next segment and all of that. But the reality is Ole Miss has the ultimate free shot. Nobody thinks Ole Miss is going to beat Georgia. Well, nobody except me. Nobody thinks that they have a chance. Nobody thinks they have any shot whatsoever to pull off that upset because of what they saw happen to Ole Miss's defense in Athens, Georgia. This game's not in Athens, Georgia. Georgia away from Athens is a different team than Georgia at Athens. They have an unbelievably home field advantage. And away from Athens, you're going to be dealing with the fact that Ole Miss is going to be the higher seed in this game. They're going to be the 6th seed going up against the 3 seed. They're going to have more people at the ball game. There's going to be more Ole Miss fans in the Sugar Bowl than Georgia fans wearing powder blue. That's going to happen. It's not going to be like Georgia where it's 90,000 people and 98,000 or 98% of them are Georgia fans, to where Trinidad Chambliss in his first road start after that 4th and 2 got stopped kind of got rattled a little bit. That's not going to happen. You're going to be dealing with a Trinidad Chambliss that's better, more composed than before. You're going to be dealing with an offensive line that, yes, is a little bit better. You're going to be dealing with a defensive line that is starting to figure things out, a more athletic linebacker unit, and, of course, the secondary that has become more competent as the season's gone on. Jalen Braxton was a revelation in that game against Tulane. So it should be pretty interesting to see how that goes. But I'm thinking Ole Miss should be pretty happy about that. In our final segment, Ole Miss is kind of playing with house money in this Sugar Bowl. And Pete Golding's press conference, it's a big reason why. He's A++ all over the place. We'll explain that right after this. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, the defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover or a failed 4th down attempt. Maybe, possibly. FanDuel lets you jump into that moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heats up. You can bet on the next touchdown score, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. If you look at the Sugar Bowl, Ole Miss are a 6.5-point underdog right now to the Georgia Bulldogs. Kind of is going that way, but the money is coming in on the Ole Miss Rebels, so that's something to pay attention to. Anyway, FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Ole Miss playing with house money right now, and a lot of that has to do with the personality that Pete Golding is putting out. You didn't see it. You didn't know what Pete Golding would be like as a head coach, because before he was at Ole Miss and not allowed to talk, he was at Alabama for 5.5 years and wasn't allowed to talk, other than things like national championship games where it was mandated. But Pete Golding is in large part, my opinion, responsible for the free shot that Ole Miss has against the Georgia Bulldogs because of all the goodwill that is built up on Pete going into this run. Over the last 2 weeks, they were chanting Pete, Pete, Pete at the game. All of that, a huge celebration in Oxford for the first round game. Pete Golding has the free shot against Georgia. And if Pete somehow finds a way to beat this juggernaut with all of this talent on the field, he is going to be well on his way to legend status, because the next game is likely either Ohio State or Miami in Glendale, Arizona. And it all starts with this game that you lost to the first time you played by 1 possession, and you had a 4th and 2 that turned the game whenever you had a player in the backfield, a play to be made, Ole Miss has been good on fourth down all year. When they know exactly what you're going to do, you have trouble doing it. They missed a tackle. Georgia got the first down. The game turned. That place got juiced. All of a sudden, Ole Miss went 3 and out, 3 and out. Georgia's offense started going, and that was the end of the ballgame. I don't think that's going to be the same story this time. I think you're going to have a Georgia offense that is a little bit overconfident because of what happened last time. Makes sense. I think you're going to have an Ole Miss offense that's a little bit overconfident because of what you had last time. I think this is going to be a much lower scoring game than what we saw when it was 43-35 or something like that in October. And whenever you look at what's going on, it's going to be a low scoring game. I expect Ole Miss to potentially slow the tempo down. Just to take a little bit of air out of the clock. In the first game, Ole Miss had 23 minutes of time of possession, something like that. They couldn't stay on the field. Actually, they scored too quickly, but they didn't stay on the field enough. And because of that, the defense kind of worn down at the end. I think Ole Miss needs to protect itself a little bit, make plays when it's available. And the biggest mismatch on the entire field, believe it or not, Georgia might be the 3 seed. The biggest mismatch is DaQuan Wright versus the Georgia linebackers. You saw that in the first matchup. They had no answer for DaQuan Wright. So having that, knowing the rematch record in the Sugar Bowl, knowing that Ole Miss's defense played really poorly and still only lost the game by 1 possession on the road, means that even though Georgia's probably gotten better since the first meeting, Ole Miss is a lot better than that. A lot better than that. They played better than that against Oklahoma. And Georgia's going to make plays. They have too good athletes not to make plays from time to time. The key is to where it's not a consistent thing. It's not a predictable thing. They make a 20-yard gain and then it goes 3 and out for a punt. Something like that. It can't be like 20-yard gain and then 3 plays later, 20-yard gain. That's where it gets into problems. It's going to be imperative on the secondary to play clean, not have coverage bust, know what's going on. It's going to be imperative that the defensive line, the front 7, they're able to contain Georgia's run game. You're not going to stop it, but you don't need to get gashed. If it's 150 yards for the game instead of 230, Ole Miss has a real chance to win the game. Real chance to control the passing game. You need to put the game on Gunnar Stockton's hand. I know he threw for 300 yards in the last matchup, but that was as a secondary thing when the running game was what was actually killing Ole Miss. If you do those things, you're going to be in good shape. And the Ole Miss defensive line is a different animal now than it was whenever they played Georgia the first time. Like a difference of 5 sacks coming into this game and then 20 sacks after it. It's not a small thing. So we'll see exactly how that goes. All right. So thank you very much for tuning in today to Locked On Ole Miss. We will continue to talk Ole Miss versus Georgia for about the next 8 days. You have Christmas coming up. The schedule's going to get weird. Please bear with me, but I'm going to try and get as much content up for you as possible, including banking stuff during this week while they're traveling all around. We're on all the social channels as well, so check that out. And also, did Locked On Ole Miss make your Spotify Wrapped? Prove it on social media to secure a free month of our brand new Everydayer Club. Just tag our national Locked On Podcast Network account on any social media, and they will drop you the code. Be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club to get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to the Memories Only Discord channel. For those of you on YouTube, we will send you to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. And on audio, make sure you check out a second listen, either Locked On College Football or Locked On SEC is right there for you. Hotty toddy, everybody. The Sugar Bowl's coming up. The biggest game that I can remember, and probably anybody alive can remember for Ole Miss football, is just about a week away. So hotty toddy, everybody.